So, it was January 8th, 2002. And I am a recent graduate from Bright Divinity School at Texas Christian University in Fort Worth, Texas. I am a freshly ordained minister of Jesus Christ in the denomination of the United Church of Christ at First Community Church, Dallas, Texas. On the day before, on January 7th, my friends helped me load up a U-Haul that had very little stuff in it. And that morning on January 8th, my father is helping me attach a trailer so that I can tow my truck behind the U-Haul up I-35 through Oklahoma and Kansas, then over to I-29 through Iowa to connect with I-90, which will take you all across South Dakota, where you reach Rapid City. Then you connect up with U.S. Highway 212 up to this sleepy little town called Broadus, Montana, which is just south of Miles City. I'll take US 212 to Broadus, and then I will turn right onto State Highway 59 and head north. That is my last turn. From there, I am 80 miles from my destination. My first pulpit, my first call, my first church, United Christian Church, United Church of Christ, Disciples of Christ in Miles City, Montana. And I am pumped. I am so excited. I am so close. And then about 5 miles outside of Broadus, Montana, up State Highway 59, I spot this. Pavement ends. Are you kidding me? Pavement ends? Pavement does not just end. Pavement only ends when I want it to end. Like when I'm going camping or hiking or fishing. Then I want the pavement to end. But I haven't intentionally planned on the pavement ending. Are you kidding me? Pavement ends? Pavement doesn't end. Not on something called a highway. Not even a state Montana highway. I looked in the atlas. Remember those? There were these things called atlases, and there was a solid black line that read State Highway 59, not a dotted line, a solid line. There ought to have been pavement, making my journey as smooth and as easy as possible. But seeing this sign on the side of the road with this vast panoramic view of high plains and rolling bluffs in eastern Montana filling up my eyes, snow wisping across the very last vestiges of my beloved pavement, there could not have been a more apt way to mark for this city boy, this gumshoe minister, that I had entered the wilderness. That was nearly 20 years ago. Not quite, but almost. The beard is whiter. The hair has recessed from the edges of my forehead. I can't run as fast or as far or as often as I used to. But in my 20 years of professional ordained ministry in the name of Jesus Christ, after passing this marker indicating that I was no longer in proverbial Kansas anymore, I have come to know this bit of wisdom. We are always in the wilderness. The Reverend Dr. Barbara Brown Taylor says it this way. The fact is, there's always a wilderness. And wildernesses come in so many shapes and sizes that the only way you can really tell that you are in one is when you look around for what you normally count on to save your life and you come up empty. Needless to say, this is not a situation that many of us seek out. In fact, most of us spend a great deal of time and money and definitely a significant amount of spiritual energy and effort trying to stay out of wildernesses. But I honestly don't know a single human being who succeeds at that. because sooner or later, every one of us will be traveling along our journey in life and will see the proverbial sign on the side of the road that says, pavement ends. And we find ourselves on our own trips through the wilderness, and we discover on that journey who we are, whose we are, and what is really important in life. And that doesn't sound like bad news to me at all. In fact, that sounds like good news. But even if no one ever wants to go into the wilderness, and if we are in the wilderness and we rage against God and the machine and all around us about how could this have happened to me, even those of us who end up there, when we want to get out of there as soon as possible, I have learned this thing about the wilderness. It is still the one most reality-based, spirit-filled, life-changing places a person, a community, or a nation can be. Don't believe me? Let's look at Moses. How did he and the Israelites end up in the wilderness? God freed them from bondage from Pharaoh, and they were free. Their wilderness journey actually begins because something good happened. Can you imagine? But that sounds right to us. I mean, ask any of us out there who have come out. It's freeing in so many ways, but it throws you straight into the wilderness. Ask any parent or guardian who has a child enter their life. It comes with great joy. And then the wilderness. But of course, loss as well. Loss is a huge reason why we find ourselves in the wilderness. Loss of a relationship, loss of income or status, loss of a home or a house, loss of physical or mental or spiritual ability, loss of freedom, loss of wellness. These can throw you into the vestiges of wilderness so quickly. What did Moses have to guide him and to help him? God gave him a moral code and promised to be with them every step of the way. What did they live on? Manna from heaven that God provided daily, but they had to go and gather up themselves. And then the prophet Miriam would find water for them to drink. God literally gave them daily bread. Not a lot, but it was enough. How long were they there? Years and years. But you might like to know that Jesus only spent weeks and weeks in the wilderness. So wildernesses come with different time spans. Was it an easy journey? Oh no. Oh no. There wasn't anything easy about the wilderness. The journey through the wilderness meandered, and then it came to dead ends, and they had to double back. Moses seems to always be taking 2 steps forward, only to take 1 step back. There were squabbles and division within the community. There was loss upon loss upon loss, none greater than the loss of Moses' sister Miriam, which devastated Moses and the community, in which they nearly gave up. There were battles to be fought. Many of them lost. Only a few of them won. There were endless conversations with God. Some of those conversations were civil. Some of them were humorous. Most of them were arguments, were lots of shouting and cursing. All of them were grounded in love, even the hard conversations, maybe especially the hard conversations. And how did Moses feel at the end of the wilderness journey? He was conflicted. Here we find Moses up a mountain yet again. Moses likes mountains, or maybe mountains like Moses. He's up on a mountain. It's where he received his calling. He's up on the mountain. It's where he received the moral code from God that would shape this nation. And it was up on the mountain that Moses is looking out upon the promised land and looking back upon his wilderness journey that he pens this song. Now, if you come to church every single Sunday for 3 years in a row, you'll never hear this song. It's not part of the lectionary. It's not part of the church's playlist. It doesn't have heavy rotation on the radio. But it is a deep cut. It's not even a B-side. It's a deep cut. And it's certainly not one of the hits. Maybe the church doesn't play this song because the church is afraid to allow our biblical ancestors, our forebears, to be all too human. Because Moses begins and ends this song with words of gratitude and thanksgiving. He's up on the mountain looking back upon his journey. And here's the thing about the wilderness. I'm really sorry to say this to you, but you can't go around it. You can't go over it. You have to go through it. That's the God-honest truth. And when we start our wilderness journey, we get this epiphany that pavement has ended and we find ourselves in the wilderness, what we often say to ourselves at the start of that journey, when we find that it is, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. That's our mantra. I don't know. But with blessed perspective of hindsight, which gifts us with 20/20 vision, we often say, look how far I've come, how far we've come. Praise be to God. And we stand there and we look back and we echo the words of Dr. King, who he himself was permitted to go up to a mountaintop the day before he died, and he caught the glimpse of the promised land, where he says, we ain't where we ought to be, and we ain't where we're gonna be. But thank God we ain't where we used to be. And Moses praises God for God's steadfast love, that Moses and Israel's constant companion on this journey was God. And Moses' heart is full of thanksgiving for God's provisions that saved their lives on more than one occasion. And Moses' words soar up to the lofty perch, humble yet profound with gratitude for God's mercies and kindnesses every day that makes God like a mother eagle who feeds and protects and instructs her young. Here on this mountaintop, having made it all the way through the wilderness with all of its dangers and toils and troubles, Moses looks back and sings like the words of the spiritual, we've come this far by faith, leaning on the Lord, and this song that says, God of our weary years and God of our silent tears, God who has brought us thus far along the way. That's looking back. But then Moses turns and looks towards the unknown future, and the song turns. The song turns cold and mean and vengeful. But don't be too hard on Moses. The song is just a snapshot in Moses' life. And Moses has been through the ringer. And many of us who have been through the ringer, when we're not having one of our better moments, can lean into judgment and anger when presented with the unknown days ahead. But within 2 chapters, with Moses facing his own mortality and that walk through the wilderness that we call the valley of the shadow of death, Moses again begins to find that grace of being grateful for life's journey and all the things that he experienced in the wilderness. The wilderness, sisters and brothers, is the most reality-based, spirit-filled, life-giving places a community, a person, or a nation can be. And we almost always are in one. And there's no way to avoid them. But God walks with us through each and every wilderness that we find ourselves in. And in doing so, I truly believe God wishes us to come out the other end of our wilderness walk with an empathetic heart, beating stronger, refraining from judging others, and instead inspired by how far we've come to help others along their weary years and to dry their silent tears. The great 12th century Jewish philosopher Maimonides once said, "We each decide whether to make ourselves learned or ignorant, compassionate or cruel, generous or miserly. No one decides for us. No one drags us along one path or the other. We are responsible for who we are." So as we walk through life, we continue to make these decisions daily. We exercise our judgment and our reactions in situations that affect our relationships, our community. Often our actions build these relationships up, but other times we feel the strain of our interactions, and as a result, we feel stress. Our life feels out of control. We have had the feelings of being overwhelmed, and we have this sense that others are treating us poorly. But if we are actually honest with ourselves, we know that we could have treated others better. We might have said things or done things that we regret. We all have times in our lives when we feel as though we are adrift in the wilderness. And that's when God's grace enters in. Like a pillar of fire, God's way of learningness and compassion and generosity guides us through the wilderness to bring us into a deeper relationship with God and each other and creation, to be more loving to our neighbors and to ourselves. So let us sing the song of Moses, for it is a deep cut of our sacred story, and it is full of humanity. It is full of sacredness. It is full of the wisdom of our journey with God, whether that journey is paved and smooth or whether the pavement is ended. And that's the good news. Thanks be to God. Amen.